On the most recent Wednesday Word of the Week, number 129, we looked at the word euangelion, good news or gospel. It originated as a gift given to the messenger who delivered good news. It became synonymous with good news itself. In the New Testament context, it came to describe the entirety of the content of the message about Jesus as the Savior. And then today what we're going to look at is the word euangelion used as a title or descriptor for a written account of Jesus. So if we think about the things that Paul described as the gospel in Romans 1, that whole conglomeration of information, when it's put in writing, we would also use the word euangelion to describe that document. So we're looking today at Mark chapter 1, verse 1, and let us dive right in and read that from the ESV. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So let's just drop right down and read it in Koine. Arche tu euangeliou Jesu Christou huiou theou. So arche, the beginning. This is a nominative absolute. It's not related to a verb. It's just standing there by itself. The beginning. The beginning of what? Tu euangeliou, of the gospel. Qualified in what sense? Jesu Christou, of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then parenthetically we have huiou theou, the Son of God. Why is it in parentheses here? Because there's about a 50-50% split in manuscripts that include huiou theou and those that don't. They're roughly equivalent in their dating and in their prevalence, so it's kind of a toss-up whether the huiou theou was originally there or was added later. One of the things that we tend to see with manuscript evidence is it's more likely that something would be added than something would be taken away. Why is that? Because if you're a pious copyist, if you're committed to the content of the text, it would seem wrong to remove something, but if you're adding something that expands or that harmonizes with other things that you've read, that seems to show more respect rather than less, you may go ahead and add the Son of God. Taking away the Son of God would seem to be an editorial decision that makes a message, that makes a decision to change the content, right? Adding, the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, if you add the Son of God, you're adding respect and honor as a copyist. If you take it away, you are diminishing that title, right? So do with that what you will. It's not worth fighting over. There's about a 50-50 split, manuscripts that have it, manuscripts that don't. Do with it what you will. But moving on, what we have here, interestingly enough, is not a sentence. Arche tu euangeliou Jesu Christou huiou theou is not a sentence. There's not a verb that's implied nor expressed. So what is it then if it's not a sentence? It's an introduction bordering on being a title. This introduces the content of the entire document, all 16 chapters, whether they be with the long ending or the short ending of chapter 16. The whole document is introduced by the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So arche is a nominative absolute that doesn't relate to a verb. Then we get our three sets of genitives, two sets of genitives if we take out the huiou theou. But we won't for our purposes here today. So the beginning of what? Tu euangeliou, of the gospel. Whose gospel? Jesu Christou, of Jesus Christ. Now, generally speaking, when we encounter that phrase, of Jesus Christ, whether as exegetes or grammarians, we would ask the question, is this a subjective genitive or is this an objective genitive? Meaning, the gospel of Jesus Christ, if it's subjective, it's the gospel belonging to Jesus Christ that originates with Jesus Christ that he is giving to the reader. Like, are we talking about the content of Jesus' words and deeds that are recorded here, the gospel belonging to Jesus Christ? Or if it's an objective genitive, are we talking about the gospel, the good news about Jesus Christ or referring to Jesus Christ? So subjective, it's Jesus's gospel. Objective, it's a gospel about Jesus. So that's a question that is sort of built into virtually any genitive phrase like this, where a noun or a substantive is modified by a genitive. Jesu Christu, of Jesus Christ. Subjective or objective? Well, here's the interesting thing. In Mark's gospel, what we get is good news from Jesus, his own teachings, his own words and commandments and commissions to his believers, his followers. And we also get the good news about Jesus from the sense that this is a narrative account of his earthly ministry, his trial, his death, his resurrection, his sending out of the disciples, etc. So it's both. Well, what do we do with that? How do we classify whether it's subjective or objective? The good news is there is a term for when it is both. This is a plenary genitive. It has elements of both the subjective genitive and the objective genitive. It's okay that it's the gospel belonging to Jesus in his teaching and the gospel about Jesus in the narrative telling his story, because it's plenary. It's both. It's the whole enchilada. Moving on from that, we get the last part, huiou theou. What is that? That's simply a genitive of relationship, right? So we know that this Jesus, about whom and from whom this gospel comes, is related to God in sonship, the Son of God. So the next thing that we get here is when we go into verse 2 and beyond, Mark launches into the content of the gospel by going all the way back to the prophet Isaiah. So he gives us an introduction, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and then launches into a quote from the prophet Isaiah, saying, here we have, beginning with a prophecy about this person hundreds of years before his birth. He launches that way so that we know this is a special person. This is not just the story of somebody who was born contemporary, a little before Mark. This is someone whose story begins hundreds of years before his birth. We go to John, and John's gospel has Jesus' existence beginning before the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? But here we have him launch with the prophet. Then he brings us to John the Baptist and the beginning of the earthly ministry, etc., etc. But there's a fascinating thing here. This is the only one of the four canonical Gospels that uses the word euangelion about itself. It's the only Gospel that calls itself a Gospel. So what does it tell us about Mark's understanding? Mark believes that the content that he is presenting, when he has now taken everything that he's learned from his own observation, from his relationship with Peter and interviewing him, from talking to other people, this information that he has compiled and organized in a structured way to communicate the story of Jesus is, in his mind, euangelion, good news, a good message, the gospel, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Here it comes, the whole, as I can present it, says Mark, of this great story, this good news about Jesus, who was prophesied hundreds of years before his birth, who was not simply a rabbi, not simply a carpenter's son, but in fact, huiou theou, Son of God, and he brings good news for all who would hear it. Great stuff. Interesting use of the word euangelion. Why don't the other gospel writers refer to it that way? I don't know. You'll have to ask them if the chance presents itself. But up until then, what we have is an interesting use of the word to describe a document that is the embodiment of a particular body of content that we see used elsewhere by Paul, etc., etc. Hope that was good for you. If it was, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, and until next time, Karis Kai Irene Humin, grace and peace to you.